This is a message written by a scientist in a private letter near the end of his life. The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. Now guess who wrote it? A failed scientist still waiting for their first real breakthrough? A chemistry teacher turned drug dealer? Or a scientist whose entire life's work turned out to be false? Well, if you guessed any of those, you'd be wrong. This was written by the Albert Einstein, arguably the most brilliant mind the world has ever produced. The man who rewrote the laws of space and time, won the Nobel Prize in Physics, and became a synonym for genius while he was still alive. He wrote this letter in 1955, just a few months before he died. Here's what's strange. That is not the confession of a man who failed. That's a man convinced he was getting away with being a fraud. At the exact same moment, the entire world called him a genius to his face. If one of humanity's greatest minds could never feel good enough, what exactly does it take to achieve that feeling, and is it even possible? This is the psychology of people who never feel good enough and how to finally break the loop. You've just sent the best possible pitch for a new opportunity. You crush the interview, you receive that callback, and even accept an offer that eclipses what you originally asked for. So you celebrate, tell all of your friends, you feel that undeniable rush of, I made it. And then a week goes by, your rent has been paid, bills are covered, you might have even gotten yourself a nice gift. But as you sit down at your desk, the same tired eyes you had before this life-changing opportunity slowly creeps back in. Then the quiet voice that you thought your achievements would drown out resurfaces and manages to sneak in a whisper. It pulls your confidence down and a familiar weariness takes over. Today, you doubt your competence at this new job. You start worrying about not being good enough, about being a fraud that's going to get found out sooner rather than later. This is not the first time you felt like this. When you graduated with good grades, you questioned if that was actually your result. When you moved to a new city, you wondered if you were good enough to fit in. When you meet the love of your life, you always remind yourself that they are way out of your league. When these things happen, the conclusion most people land on is that they simply haven't done enough yet. They aren't good enough yet. And that once they do something more or achieve the next thing, finally, they will be good enough. But look closely at what is actually happening in each of these moments, and you quickly realize that there is no finish line left to reach, because in every one of those moments, you already had the outcome sitting in your hands, the diploma, the city, the person, the job. What was missing wasn't more achievement, it was permission to actually own the achievement that you actually had. Think of it like moving into a house you paid for in full, but the deed still lists someone else's name. So you live there, you sleep there every night. Nothing about the ownership is technically wrong, but it never feels quite like yours. And the discomfort doesn't fade no matter how long you stay. With a house, at least there's a fix. You can talk to a lawyer or go to an office. There's a form I'm sure you can file to get the deed corrected. But for this, there is no office, no form, no one you can call to reissue the paperwork on your own worth. Well, I should correct that. There is. And it's you. And so far, you just haven't agreed to sign. To understand why you keep withholding your own signature, we have to look at how your brain handles evidence of your own worth. Before we get into that, there's something else worth knowing. There's a version of you being assembled right now that is used to dictate everything about your life, and you don't get a say about what goes into it. Just Google your name right now and you'll see just how much information about yourself is accessible to everyone. This is because of data brokers. They build a profile of you, including everything from your name to your location, your employment history, email address, even your phone number and financial situation. This profile is then sold to advertisers to target you with ads, or even worse, obtained by bad actors looking to scam and steal from you. The good news is that by law, these companies have to delete your data if you ask. The bad news is that doing it yourself can take weeks or months or even longer. Well, not anymore, thanks to Incogni, the sponsor of today's episode. Incogni helps remove your personal information from places you may not even know are storing it by automatically and continuously sending removal requests, then following up to help keep your information out of reach. And with their new custom removals feature, if you find a site exposing your personal information, you can send the link directly to Incogni, and their team will work to get it taken down, even if it's out of their usual network. To protect yourself, go to incogni.com/Aperture deal and use the code Aperture deal to get 60% off an annual plan, because they can't harm you if they can't find you. Now back to our story. In 1978, psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes at Georgia State University set out to study a group of female high achievers, straight-A students, professionals with real credentials, real promotions, real evidence stacked up behind them. What they found was that a significant number of these women carried a private belief that they weren't as capable as everyone assumed, and that it was only a matter of time before someone figured it out. Clance and Imes gave it a name: the imposter phenomenon. This wasn't self-doubt that happens when you simply don't have the evidence to prove your worth. For these subjects, the evidence was there, multiple of them, but it still failed to change the verdict that they had about themselves. They mapped out how it works, and they call it the Impostor Cycle. A new task shows up, and it triggers anxiety before anything has even started. That anxiety gets managed in one of two ways: either overworking to the point of exhaustion or procrastinating until the panic takes over. In both cases, the task gets done, sometimes even done well. But instead of that success updating the belief, it gets explained away. It was just luck or good timing. I was just working harder than everyone else, not working smarter. And then the next task appears, and the anxiety, well, it returns in full strength, instead of confidence from the successful completion of the previous task. Think of it like a ledger, where every deposit gets miscategorized under someone else's name. The money is real, it's still sitting there, but none of it ever gets recorded as yours, so your balance never grows no matter how many deposits come in. A real ledger has a paper trail, a receipt, a way to prove that the money is, in fact, yours. Unfortunately, self-worth doesn't come with receipts. There's no document that you can point to that settles it once and for all. And it turns out that the missing receipt isn't a flaw in the system, it's part of our mental design. Because the filter was never built to test whether you are competent. It was built to protect a conclusion that got reached before the testing even began, which means no amount of evidence was ever going to change the results. This leaves an uncomfortable question sitting right underneath all of this. If the mind is already this committed to filtering out proof of your own competence, something must have taught it to treat success as a threat to be managed, rather than a fact to be accepted and even celebrated. And that means to figure this out, we have to go back further than the cycle itself, to whatever installed that filter in the first place. So, Where does a filter like that come from? Nobody is born rejecting proof of their own worth. Take a newborn, for example. It cries when it needs something, and then it settles down immediately after that need is met. A baby is wholly confident in its ability to get what it wants by crying. Therefore, whatever instills that sense of not being good enough comes much later, and crucially, it comes from outside of your own brain. It starts early, and in the most sensitive period of your development. As you move through your first years, your mind takes its shape from the household you're raised in. Sure, some people might be predisposed to it, but the way you're raised ultimately determines how your inner critic is set up. Things like how fast it fires or how loud it shouts, and even whose voice it speaks in. You've probably seen this at an airport. A parent and a toddler mid-meltdown at a gate full of people watching. Next time you encounter this, don't watch the kid, watch the parent. When you're really looking, you will see what the parent's warmth is responding to. Is it the child or the child's behavior? For some kids, the answer is subtle but constant. The affection arrives when they perform and it cools when they don't. This leads to the child only feeling acceptance and support when they achieve something, not merely for who they are. Psychologist Carl Rogers argued that children need one thing above everything else, and that is to feel valued simply for existing. He called this unconditional positive regard. Acceptance and support for a person regardless of anything they do. But in reality, a lot of children don't get that. Instead, they're met with the conditional sense of value. And you know what? You've probably felt it growing up too. The approval that only shows up for good grades or trophies or positive comments at parent-teacher meetings. But if any of these positive signs aren't there, the parental love goes cold, sometimes even withdrawing completely. Rogers calls this the conditions of worth, and it varies between households. In one home, getting good grades in math could meet a parent's condition of worth, but in another, they may prioritize good grades in literature and history. It's hard not to tie your identity to achievements when your first hug with your dad only happened because of an A in a math test. And I'm not throwing parents under the bus here. I'm sure most, if not all, parents think they mean well. But when a child realizes this is how their world works, something catastrophic happens. They absorb these conditional moments and make them part of their core identity. The achievements become less like a path towards getting better and more like all there is to a person. After absorbing something so fundamentally defining at a young age, you won't know the difference between this is what my parents required of me and this is who I am. When things don't pan out as intended, you take it then as a personal failure. That's why you feel shattered after getting an A-. The weight of living up to an idea your parents planted becomes so strong, even subtle, forgettable moments manage to stick with you. Meanwhile, for the parents, it's just a random conversation that they forget by the next morning. Take it from Emmy Award-winning actor Donald Sutherland. He's 16, not now, but he was 16. He's awkward and very self-conscious about his looks. One day, he asks his mother if he's good-looking. She pauses, and after what feels like a long while, she responds by saying, "Your face has character." Now, he's not delusional. He instantly understands what that means. He goes to his room, hides for the rest of the day, and experiences a profound shift within. Decades pass, and he still carries it with him, even though he's had a career that would be the complete opposite of what she said. Fame, acclaim, and an appearance the whole world found compelling. Yet none of it overwrote an ambiguous sentence from one moment in his early life. The voice of the inner critic had been installed far too early, and it ran too long for him to reason with it. What's even sadder is that his mum most likely wasn't trying to be cruel. She was probably being honest, maybe even kind in her own way. That's what makes it harder to shake. Because if it was a comic level of cruelty, you could dismiss it easily. But when it's just that mundane, it stings a lot harder. A parent being imperfect in a small, survivable way, only for it to not even be survivable. And it usually isn't as direct as Sutherland's mother's words. Sometimes it's a comparison to a sibling, or a weak response in a moment when you feel proud of yourself. It's the kind of praise that only shows up for the report card, never the person who earned it. After some time, a simple glance, a tired sigh, and you get it. Some childhoods look perfect in memory, yet they are littered with the pockets of neglect buried underneath. Right now, there's a person who feels like they had a good childhood, yet still feel like they are not enough. And here's what a villainless childhood creates. A voice that sounds and speaks like you, but tells you things you'd never say to someone you love. For a while, that voice stays busy with the things that you do. It grades your tests, then it grades your performance at your job, and eventually, it monitors the way you show up every day. As this happens, the question is always, was that good enough? You'll be able to live with it for some time. After all, there's always more for you to do. But at some point, the voice stops grading your work and starts grading you. It stops asking you if you did enough and starts asking if you are enough. There's no grade needed to justify your presence in a room, and yet it asks you. Because somewhere back there, you stopped asking about the work and started wondering about yourself. Am I enough? Well, it feels like an open question. Something you could sit with for a few seconds and come up with an honest answer. But as you let it sink, your mind starts to dig. You wonder what life would be like if you just did a little more, worked a little harder, and above everything else, hit the goal that settles your mind for good. You think you're negotiating for an answer, that there's something deeper to process that you just haven't reached. But there isn't. You made up your mind about yourself years ago, back when the voice first got installed. Ever since then, you've been living inside of a decision you don't remember making. Normally, you'd expect the answer to work in a specific order, one where you look at your life currently, you weigh what's actually there, and then you emerge with some conclusion about yourself. Evidence first, conclusion second. That's the honest way you are expected to do it. Yet for people who never feel good enough, that process runs in reverse. The conclusion of not being good enough came first. Now the evidence they gather in adulthood gets sorted to fit into that narrative. And this is so easy to encounter in real time. Something goes well for you. You finally buy a home. You call someone you respect and they tell you that they are proud of you. But instead of accepting the compliment, you start explaining it away like it's no big deal. You say that the timing was just right, or there was a huge discount, you got lucky. You discredit yourself and reduce your achievement to a low standard. Meanwhile, the second something goes wrong, all of that effort disappears. You immediately accept it as wholly and totally your own fault. At the moment, it feels true, but that's not the result of any investigation. You do that because it matches what you decided about yourself a long time ago. Two filters are running at once, one for everything good and one for everything bad. That's why thinking, I did something bad, sounds fixable. It's an action, and an action can be addressed. There's usually an opportunity to apologize, try again, and do better next time. But thinking, I am bad, is about you. It's a verdict on your identity as an individual. With that, there isn't anything to fix because as far as you are concerned, the problem isn't in what you did, it's you, the person that did it. When you start to feel certain that you're flawed in a way that creates discomfort in your day-to-day life, something else happens. You begin to believe that if anyone ever saw you the way that you see yourself, they'd walk away. So you spend your life making sure they don't. You build a version of yourself that works, one that can be capable, put together, and easy to be around. That's the version of you that gets sent out into the world. Meanwhile, the other one, the one you believe is the real you, that person is out of sight. Most people never notice the gap, but you feel it every single day of your life. A distance between the person everyone is clapping for out in the audience and the person you think you actually are. What this does is ensure that nothing good can ever actually reach you. If every compliment is seen as politeness, every success as luck, every bit of love as, well, they just don't know the real me yet, then praise will never land for you. There's no dose of acknowledgement that works because everything is intercepted before it ever can reach you. You could win it all in life. You could be adored by everyone in the room, and it'll all just slide off because you can't help but experience that inner discomfort. That's the real design of this kind of life's trap. No achievement is ever going to be enough because the feeling doesn't have anything to do with achievements in the first place. There's a diary entry that shows this better than I could ever say. In 1938, a writer sat down to work on a book. This wasn't a beginner hoping to get discovered. He'd already published a number of successful novels. By all metrics, he knew what he was doing. Yet that day, he opened his journal and wrote this, quote, "I am not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people," end quote. That was John Steinbeck when he was writing The Grapes of Wrath, a book that would go on to win the Pulitzer Prize, sell millions of copies, and help him earn a Nobel Prize. Much like Einstein, decades later, he called himself a fraud in his own handwriting, all in the middle of proving the exact opposite. I think that's the whole issue right here. The proof he already had was overwhelming. Right under his pen, there was a book that would help him win a Nobel. Yet none of it would reach him. A masterpiece doesn't undo your inner turmoil. It just becomes another thing that you did that still fails to count for you. So if you've ever wondered why reassurance doesn't land for some successful people, and why you can tell them they are brilliant and watch it change nothing, that's why. But that leaves a new question. If no achievement can ever meet the standard that you have within, then who set the bar that you keep failing to clear? You didn't choose it. You never sat down and agreed to fail. You might wonder if it's your parents, but after some time, even if their approval finally lands, you still don't feel good enough. That's because, unfortunately, after a while, even you are no longer a useful critic, so you borrow one from someone else. The ability to observe is a strength that rewards us amazingly well. But after a certain point, it actually begins to work against us. When you look around, you start measuring yourself against what other people seem to have. Someone with the career, or the body, or the house, or the easy confidence. And without ever deciding to, you appoint them as the standard. Their life becomes the passing grade for yours. Not because you sat down and chose that bar, but because they were there and they looked like they're having fun. They look like they're winning. And what you're really measuring isn't the house or the title, it's whether you match the person you imagine they are. Someone's settled. They're complete. They are enough. You decide that being them is what being enough looks like. So every day, you fall short of a life that was never yours, judging against a standard that you handed to a stranger. And notice who you actually envy. It's never the billionaire. You can't picture that life clearly enough to want it. It's the person who is one step ahead of you. The friend from university with the job you almost applied for. The guy whose kitchen you've actually stood in. Envy needs details. It only runs on lives you can furnish in your head. Which means the person you've been measuring yourself against wasn't chosen for being happy. They were chosen for being visible. And that's the unspoken deal that you're making. When someone seems to have arrived, you copy their destination and tell yourself that the feeling will come along with it. But Spoilers, it doesn't. Because the feeling was never in the thing that they had. It was in the story that you told yourself about them. If by some miracle or some very hard work, you do get the thing you're after, you finally reach the level of the person you were watching. Maybe it's the promotion, or the relationship, or the milestone. Suddenly, it dawns on you that the goal arrived, but the feeling that you wanted, that you expected, didn't come with it. Instead of realizing that the whole thing was merely a projection, you move on to the next thing. You conclude that you must have copied the wrong person. So you pick someone further ahead, someone with a higher standard, and so the process starts all over again. So it's not just that the bar stays ahead of you on its own. You play a major role in the change by volunteering to keep pushing it further and further. You keep running forward, creating new targets, watching other people, and looking for someone whose life contains the piece that yours doesn't. And every time you find the person you want to model yourself after, you hand them the pen for your own self-esteem. Meanwhile, the one signature that matters stays unsigned. Most people alive right now are running some version of this loop. That's because we live in a system built on exploiting these feelings. Modern society teaches us that where we end up is earned, and the people at the top got there because they deserved it. Therefore, if you work hard and you're capable, you'll rise too. The logic seems sound, it seems progressive. But turn it over and you realize a very dangerous idea. A world that implies that every success is deserved believes the same for failure. Anyone who didn't earn their place among the winners has no one to blame but themselves. Now your position stops being your circumstance and it becomes your verdict. The irony of this modern design speaks for itself. The word meritocracy was invented in 1958 by a British sociologist named Michael Young, and he used it as satire. His book, The Rise of Meritocracy, described a nightmare future society sorted by merit. It was a warning of this kind of future that was, unfortunately, taken as the blueprint. He spent the rest of his life annoyed that people had taken the word but dropped the warning. The pre-digital age world was a brutal place, but it never had the same verdict. If you were born poor, it was fate, not a statement about your worth. The world we live in is gentler on paper, but twice as cruel underneath. Today, you'll need to handle the full responsibility for where you land, and it's advertised to you as freedom. And what makes it even worse is that everybody's position is visible. Online feeds show you who's ahead, which makes you feel even more behind. Life has become a game of who's winning and who's losing, and it never stops, even when you're just trying to live. You inevitably end up watching everyone else and measuring yourself against them constantly. So when you feel like you're not enough, you're not just fighting against an old voice from childhood, you're also carrying a mind that was trained to reject any kind of proof if it arrives. And on top of all that, you're existing in a culture that measures everyone constantly and claims that the rankings are wholly deserved. It's heartbreaking, knowing that we've quietly buried the discomfort as personal failure. Meanwhile, it's been manufactured to be every part of you. Ironically, recognizing this is a relief in itself, because if the problem isn't you, then the solution might not have to be about you either. By now, you may feel a little lighter from this whole experience, but maybe there's still one question aching in your mind. If the problem isn't that you haven't achieved enough, then how exactly could you free yourself from this feeling? You might be waiting for the part where I tell you to build your self-esteem, finally believe in yourself, and prepare for a brighter future. But the data doesn't support that argument. And to be honest, I won't stand for it either. The filter we struggle with doesn't reject evidence because there isn't enough of it. It rejects evidence because it was built to protect a conclusion that came before any evidence showed up. So just saying, well, just believe you're good enough, is like feeding your mind the same material that your inner filter was designed to destroy. It won't land, for the same reason that Steinbeck and Einstein's achievements didn't land. A researcher named Kristen Neff spent years studying this, and she draws a different line from what most of the world sees, and that line sits between self-esteem and self-compassion. The thing about self-esteem is that it works like a score. It inevitably measures how well you think you're doing, so it lives and dies on these comparisons. It goes up when you win. It drops when you lose. And in between those two things, it has to be defended against everyone doing better than you. It's the exact thing this video has circled around. It's the thing you can never lock down because when you stop performing, well, the number falls. But self-compassion is different. It isn't a score at all. Neither is it a judgment on whether you are good enough. It's simply the way you treat yourself, regardless of the answer. When Neff measured it, she found something the self-help industry mostly gets backwards. People running on self-compassion had a steadier sense of their worth than people running on self-esteem. Not because they'd convinced themselves they were better than everybody else. Instead, it was because their worth was never plugged into a scoreboard in the first place. There was nothing to win, and that also meant there was nothing to lose. Deep down, it's something you've experienced before. Remember how I said the voice that you inherited sounds like you, but says things that you would never say to someone you love? Sit with that for a second. Now, imagine a friend, someone you love and who loves you, called you and said that they'd failed, that they'd felt like a fraud, and that everyone was about to figure out the truth. Would you try to verify their achievements? Would you spend hours of your day trying to prove the fraud allegations wrong? No. By default, you would be kind, and then you would be honest, and then most importantly, you would be present and emotionally steadfast for them, never leaving them to suffer on their own. You already know how to confront this filter. You do it for everyone, except the person that inner voice follows around all day. Self-compassion is turning that helping hand inwards. Not lying to yourself that you're the best, you're not pumping up your score, you're just refusing to abandon yourself the moment you fall short. It's the difference between a judge and a friend. And here's the strange part. It will feel awkward at first. If you've never extended empathy inwards, it would seem like you're acting in a play or just playing pretend. But once you manage to make a habit out of it, you'll begin to observe the difference it makes in moments where you previously spiraled into despair. And this, right here, is what signing the deed actually means. It's not a stack of new achievements that are big enough to convince the landlord. It's the realization that there's no landlord at all. There's just you. A you that decides to stop asking for permission to exist. Now, the voice won't suddenly go silent. In fact, I can't guarantee if it ever will. It's older than most of your memories, and it isn't going to pack up and leave just because you finally understand where it came from. It will keep talking. It will flinch at the A-. It will discount your wins, and it will whisper that everyone is about to find out how awful you think you are. But when that voice stops being at the center of your identity, it becomes just another thing that talks, not a verdict about your true value. So think back to where we began. A private letter and the intimate confessions of a dying man. A man who called himself an involuntary swindler. Not a failure, not a fraud who had finally been caught. This was Albert Einstein, the man we equate to the word genius. At the end of it all, he still felt like he had somehow gotten away with something wrong. When you realize how strange it is, it dawns on you that collecting evidence is a fool's errand. There is no higher achievement to unlock. Einstein hit the absolute ceiling of what a human mind had been credited with, and it still wasn't enough to reach the part of him that decided whether he was enough. If it couldn't reach Einstein, it was never going to reach you through a promotion or any other material goal. The whole time, it was a trap. A question that asks, how do I finally become enough? And then sets you up for a futile search. Achievement isn't a currency that calms your inner filter. The way out isn't to win the case of self-worth. It's to stop holding that trial altogether. Einstein died in 1955, decades before Kristin Neff's groundbreaking research on self-compassion. He never got to see that self-worth and self-compassion weren't the same thing. But you get to. There's no flawless version of you sitting at the top of some climb that you haven't finished. There's a good enough self, one that's already here, and that is who you are and who you should choose to be. Click the video on screen to keep watching our playlist where we break down the psychology of different groups of people. I'll see you there.